This is the Real Estate Investing 365 podcast, your go-to source for real estate investing strategies so you can start living the life you want and get where you want to go. With your host, Justin Hanna.
Hey everybody, welcome back. Another episode, Real Estate Investing 365. Today I got with me Boone. She is a former aerospace engineer. She's the owner of Hipster Investments. She's facilitated over $18 million in real estate sales in her investment company. She's written over 170 articles for Bigger Pockets and The Motley Fool. She's been featured on Fox Business, U.S. News, and Business Insider. Allie, thanks for being here. Appreciate it.
You bet. Happy to be here.
Yeah, definitely. So you've done all kinds of things, and you got lots of article writing experience and lots of podcast experience. So you're probably better at this than I am.
Yeah. Well, nah. I wouldn't be able to host my own podcast, so you're already a leg up on me on that one.
Well, good.
I can sit here and get led around all day long, but if you say hey, prompt someone to.
Well, you might see I might not be a very good host either, but we're about to find out.
You're already more fun than some.
That's good.
Good.
So, we're going to dive into obviously your business and everything because you do lots of interesting. I was listening to Joe Fairless that interviewed you, and he said it's kind of like the what do you call it, the Burr and
the Burkeys?
The Burkeys, yeah.
The Burkeys. I don't want this. I'm going to make it a totally judgmental statement. I hate the Burr acronym. I think I said it on Joe's. I don't know who started that, but could we have come up with anything else? So as if I didn't already hate that acronym enough. Yeah. Now it's part of my turnkeys. Right. And I'm oh man, can somebody come up with a new one? But so for a while, I was what do we call these things? Burr plus turnkey, but then that was taking a while to write out. So it's now become the Burkeys. And ironically, someone had just reached out to me whose last name was Berkey, spelled very different. I was like, dude, you have to buy a Berkey because you're a Berkey. He's it's the first thing I thought of. Yeah,
well, you need to think of your own term there to trademark, and then maybe you could beat out old Brandon Turner, who's probably the one that invented all that. So who knows?
I don't know.
Either way, it's
the Burkeys, whatever you want to call them.
The Burkeys or whatever. Yep. So we'll dive in first to maybe your real estate background, how you got started in it. I see that you were a former aerospace engineer, so that's kind of a different path than real estate investing.
I mean, we still use spreadsheets. So.
Still use spreadsheets. There's still some numbers involved.
Still make a mean spreadsheet.
Yeah. So why don't we dive into that and kind of give us a rundown of your background and how you got started, and then we'll move forward from there.
Totally. So the short of it is I went to school. It was kind of the whole situation of what I should be doing kind of thing. You grow up hearing what you should do, go to school, get a good job security, whatever. Mm-hmm. So I pursued that, and I started in aerospace engineering because I was, before that, a pilot. And I thought I was going to go to school for a professional pilot, but I was that seems a little limiting if I ever decide not to be a professional pilot. So I was well, what's the same thing that pays more? So I picked engineering, which not even remotely the same. But so I went through, got my master's degree in aerospace engineering, started working in the corporate field of that job, working for a big defense contractor. And I hadn't even sat down for the first time in my new cubicle when I knew I was oh no. My office before that, I was flight instructing. So the office was my sky, blue skies and, having fun in airplanes and buzzing Farmer John's farmhouse and all that kind of stuff. And now I'm walking into this stark gray cubicle, and I'm in business casual clothes that I absolutely hate. And I was oh, this isn't going to work. Hadn't even sat down yet. And so as soon as I sat down, I was now how am I going to get out of here? Never mind all of the 8 or 9 years of schooling I had just gone through. But I spent the next 5 years trying to figure my way out of corporate, and occasionally doing some engineering here and there. But I started reading every hardcover, hard copy book possible. The internet was there, but I wasn't a big online there weren't as many resources as there are now. So I had stacks of books, and what I came to was that it was going to be business or real estate investing to get me out of corporate. I didn't know what either of those really looked like or what that would involve, but I had a lot of skills at the time, but they weren't something that could directly get me out of corporate. So I was having to explore all of this brand new. And eventually I had, of course, subscribed to every email list on the planet because I wanted to do anything other than engineering. And at some point, a investment opportunity came in. There was a webinar about it, and I got an advertisement for it. And I was like, "Oh, sure, I'll watch the webinar." And it struck my fancy, and I pursued this investment, which it ended up not working out, and it's not even really part of my real estate career now. But when I did that, I thought I didn't see it as a way out of corporate, but I was like, well, I still have a corporate job and a good W-2 paycheck. I might as well do something smart with it, so I could start investing on the side. That way, when I finally leave the job, however that's going to be, then at least I have some kind of asset list going on. And it was through pursuing that opportunity that I started meeting people in real estate investing. And again, still thinking this was just going to be a side time thing, but kind of one thing led to another. And I started kind of doing the side hustle. I started investing in turnkey rental properties, which I'm sure we'll talk about later. And everyone was watching me do this, and they're like, wait, what are you buying? Because turnkeys at the time, they had existed forever, but people were just now kind of starting to talk about them. And I knew for me, I didn't realize that there was an option to not negotiate deals, find motivated sellers, swing hammers, all that kind of stuff. It wasn't really my thing. So then everyone else was curious about it. So they're like, what are you buying? And so my cousin ended up buying, my mom's friend ended up buying. And that, the agents all approached me and were like, hey, you're already sending people to us. Like, let's work together. So then I thought this would be yet just more side hustle, side paycheck. And one day I woke up and it had picked up so much steam that I was like, this is it. So I had thought I was going to have to start a business or do real estate investing. And then ironically, I ended up with a real estate investing business. So I tried to work that job as long as I could until I was working top secret stuff on the engineering side at this point. So I only had minimal access to unclassified computers. So at some point, the decision had to get made of like, I'm holding myself back from real estate by staying in this job, or, I don't really have the life savings to take this jump. But I just did it. And that was about 7.5 years ago now. And I've been riding the entrepreneurial roller coaster ever since. I mean, real estate happens to be a part of that, but way more of my mental stress and challenges and things that I work with are really on the entrepreneur side. But it's kind of cool because the entrepreneur side, it's exactly relevant to real estate investors too, because when you're a real estate investor, chances are you're doing it on your own, like unless you're working for some company or something. But you're an entrepreneur, however way you want to look at it. So it's been kind of cool being able to combine all those things and really see the different aspects of the whole industry, entrepreneurship, play with different things, and really be in charge. I tell everyone the first year I left my corporate job, I had never been more broke, but I'd also never been happier either, because now I was in charge and I got to go to bed when I wanted to and sleep in as late as I wanted to, but I was working between those hours. And so, yeah, that's kind of where I am now. And so the company took off. It was awesome. I'm still doing it. I'm exploring different things at this point. We talked about the bird keys. We'll probably talk about those. That's kind of a twist on the standard turnkey that we've been working with. I've got a book I'm trying to get it out. I'm not very good at getting books out, but I have a book coming at some point. If anyone is good at getting books out. So just kind of playing and see what is next, because I don't really know what that is.
That's cool. No, that's awesome. What's the book called? Go ahead. I like it. And
as of now, I recently got feedback that the title has to change, but I'm pretty sure I've decided that I'm not changing it. I understand their points, but it is called Not Your How-To Guide to Real Estate Investing. Life lessons on hacking your mind before you hack your wallet. So the idea with it being that I say that there's no how-to guide in the world that's going to help you get where you're trying to go if you don't have the right mindset going into it. And when it comes to real estate investing, because most of us have to be self-taught because we didn't really learn this in school, I feel like everybody wants a how-to guide. Everyone's offering a how-to guide. It's like, oh, you got to do this and you should do this and here's how you do it. And that's what we're focused on, because it's like, we want to get to a goal. Well, how do we get there? Well, people are completely skipping over the whole mindset part of it of, for simple example, all the different strategies have different risk points, effort requirements, skill requirements. They accomplish different things, and people jump right over that and start trying to look for a how-to guide on how to, whatever it is they think they want to do, all the while negating what actually makes sense for you. So it's kind of hitting on that and just kind of bringing to light things that maybe people haven't thought about. It is more passive income based because that's what I care about. But we've got investor interviews in it, to give you a real world perspective of so a wholesaler, what does that actually look like in the real world versus what the guru is trying to tell you is so cool about it. We have flippers, me with the turnkeys, all that kind of stuff to kind of give a broad perspective of what does a day in the life of that look like? Like what skill sets are actually required to try and help give people more information to make more educated decisions so they can hopefully avoid losing a lot of money down the road for choosing maybe a path that wasn't quite suited to them.
Yeah, no, I'm totally glad I asked that question, because the next question that I had that I was
Yeah.
thinking while you're talking was, back when you first got hired into your aerospace job, the
Mm-hmm.
first engineering job, and you walk in there, day one, you said, "Oh shoot," you
Uh-oh.
know what I mean? Like, what am I gonna do to this
It was a
thing?
way
Like,
different word than shoot.
yeah, yeah, I'm sure. And so, you know, then you spent the next 5 years, like, kind of like
Mm-hmm.
working. You're like, okay, well, I went to school. You probably had maybe debt, or
Mm-hmm.
you had, growing up bills. You got real
Yeah.
stuff going on. So you spent the next 5 years trying to get away. Whereas most people, I think, they get into that, and a lot of people get into those environments and are like, oh, this is horrible.
Yeah.
But they end up staying there for 30 years. Like,
Yeah.
same with the field I'm in. It's like most people, not a lot of people work for the company I work for and
Mm-hmm.
leave. They mostly get hired, like huge, like probably 85% of them, and stay
Yeah.
here for 40 freaking years. Like, oh
Yeah.
God, it seems like a nightmare. But I
Yeah.
mean, and most of them at the same time want to leave. So what's the
Yeah.
mindset behind, you know, getting a job like that and then thinking, I just got to make the jump? Like, how do you make that
Mm-hmm.
jump away from that job, and just like, the time is never going to be right, but what
Right.
is some mindset terminal or mindset stuff behind that?
Yeah, I think it's such an important question, and I feel very lucky, or sometimes depending on the day, I don't think this is as lucky at all. I really, from the time I was a kid, I've always I've wanted what I want. End of story. Like I've always been extremely clear on what I want. And for me, my big thing is freedom. Like if I don't have freedom, I'm not happy. I always make the joke like I'm probably the only person in Los Angeles driving a stick shift car because I don't even want my transmission telling me what to do. Like I like
That's funny.
I want the freedom to shift the car when I want to shift like
Yeah.
so a little bit of an extreme example and occasional therapy over that. But
Yeah.
um freedom is my thing. So for me, my freedom drive, again, I'm lucky that I have that inherent in me. Some days it's not lucky because it's like, but to answer your question with it is like, it felt like I didn't have a choice. Like if I had stayed in that job, I mean, I don't know if it's that my soul would have been sucked out of me. I didn't feel like I had a choice at all. And so, I think one of the best things that my parents really gave me as far as a trade or whatever it's called, they really instilled confidence in me. And I think confidence more than anything is one of the most important things for anybody to have for several reasons, because this world is hard to navigate. Like we didn't show up here with owner's manuals, and like at that time I had the confidence, at the time specifically, kind of in my mind I was like, I have the confidence that I can figure this out. And at the same time it was like I don't have a choice. Like I really didn't feel like I had the choice, and I was trying to be strategic of when I did it and all that kind of stuff. But and even now it's like I sometimes wish that I would be perfectly content at a 9 to 5 job and I get my paycheck every Friday, because this entrepreneur crap is for the birds and it's exhausting and challenging. But it's like I don't have that option. Like
Yeah.
I want it so bad sometimes. But so for me that was a big part of it, is I felt like I didn't have a choice. But I would say that to, like, if someone doesn't have that strong of a drive or that feeling, I think it's so much about really latching on to what it is that you really want, because it was also that drive that in the first however many years of entrepreneurship, or I could argue till now because it's constantly happening, when times get tough as an entrepreneur, I don't have a choice. Like I have to get over that, because if I don't get over that challenge, I'm going to lose my freedom. And for me, that's like my soul. And
Mhm.
so, you know, it's so important, I think, to latch on to what is that thing that it is that you really want. And, maybe you say like, I want to flip houses or whatever. That's not the thing. Like, what are you trying to achieve? Like, what is that one thing that's so strong in you that you have to connect with? And I think that's what kind of sets you over the leap. And I would say too, if I were to redo it, I would definitely not leave my job until I had a little more money in savings. Like I think I put some unnecessary undue stress on me in the first year because I didn't really save up a nest egg. I was freaking out. Like, for someone, a former control freak, suddenly not having money was quite enlightening. Um But, so really connect with that thing, but also like set yourself up to like know yourself and know like I could survive those challenges, but that might drown other people. Like, set yourself up. You can do it intelligently. You can make the dive, if you want to call it that. You can put floaties on your arms. You don't just have to dive in and hope to God you know how to swim. So, thinking about things and really taking it as like self-awareness and self-honesty. Like, what is it that you really want and what is going to make you feel comfortable doing this?
Yeah, no, for sure. Like you said, so many things that resonate with myself there. Like I tell my wife all the time, man, I wish I could just be happy, like chilling here and working for
I
the
think it's
next
like
30
every other
years.
day I have that thought.
Yeah, it's
Like,
like it would be so stress free. Like I've never in this job, I make a
uh
decent amount of money and there's almost nothing I can't buy
yeah,
like as far as like toys,
yeah,
but I just can't do it. And but
hmm
what you said is so true that just don't give up. If you
yeah,
well, what I was going to say was the fact that so many people today hear all these podcasts and all these motivational speakers say, "Oh, like you're going to be a real estate investor full time, quit your job and
hmm
live the free life and everything." Like,
yeah.
yeah, that's true, except for the fact there's a lot of
Sometimes.
freaking work that goes on in between, like leaving your
Uh-huh.
job and then living that investor life. And it's
Yeah,
not like you're going to go out there and get an HGTV show and like live this dream life right away.
or
Like, there's going to
not.
be a lot of shitty times in between, I'm sure. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And
Well, it's the
so,
same with like passive income. Everyone's like, "Oh, money you don't have to work for." Yeah, that's cool and it's true, but it takes a lot of work like to
yeah,
get that in place.
yeah,
Like, so it's not a brainless, or yeah, it's not, I mean, it's not brainless. Like, it takes effort and you kind of got to earn it. But yeah,
yeah.
same type of thing for sure.
It's like that book with the I think The Secret or whatever, and they talk
Yeah.
about just like envisioning it. Okay, envisioning, I agree, there is like definitely benefits to that. And successful people that envision a bunch of stuff, like, and
Yeah.
those things end up coming true, that
Mhm.
works for them because they did all the work to make those things come
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
It's not
It's
just like
totally true.
it's not thinking about it all day long and then all of a sudden poof, one day you wake up
Uh-huh.
and you're like free. It's like it's
Well, and
crazy.
people
So
ask me all the time, they're like, "Oh, well, how'd you end up doing turnkey rental properties?" And in a sense, they kind of fell in my lap. Like, I didn't seek out looking for turnkey rental properties. I didn't even know what they were, and or you could call it rental properties in general. Like, that's become kind of my real estate genre, if you want. Um, but I caveat that with like, yeah, it kind of fell in my lap, but that was after 5 years of hustling hard. Because like, to say it fell in my lap is more to say like, I didn't know that was what the answer was going to be. Like, putting all that work in for 5 years, it allowed the answer to present itself to me. And I tell people all the time, like, leading up to that, to me starting Hipster, I always say like I had 173 business ideas and only one of them worked, and it was Hipster. And what was the difference between Hipster and the other genius ideas? Genius is a very sarcastic word.
yeah,
Um, and all the other 172 ideas, and the sole difference between those is that I never knew what Hipster's end game was going to be. Like, I designed it day by day. I mean, it kind of set itself up a little bit in the beginning, and then like, but once I took the leap from corporate, like, it was a big learning curve for a control freak to not know where we were going with this. And so I had to revamp my brain, get off of the end goal because I didn't even know what that was, and just do the best I could every day. Whereas the other 172 ideas, I came up with the end goal first and tried to figure out how to work backwards to it. And so, I know people have built successful companies doing it that way. Like, yes, here's my goal, I'm going to make it happen. But for me, it was very much this organic thing and just looking at it very differently. So, like, where did Hipster come from? I don't know. Like, it doesn't look like that much went into it, but it was all of that time that went into it. So, passive income, just go be a gazillionaire flipper. Like, yeah, those things are possible, but man, do they take a lot of work getting into it. And I think people are just kind of naive to that. And turnkey rental properties, they're advertised as hands-off rental properties. Well, I learned quickly not to use that advertising because people take that as an excuse to detach their head from their shoulders. Like,
yeah.
hello, like, we still need your brain in the equation. Like, and it's not hands-off, but it's, so for everything hands-off, passive, whatever, there's still work involved easily.
Definitely, for sure. And it's probably a little bit of your like engineering background too that you
Hmm
if you think about the end product and then try to
Yeah.
like re-engineer it backwards, it doesn't really
Yeah.
work. It has to be like free flowing and
Yeah.
kind of organic, like you said. So
Yeah, and so to convince an engineer to like freestyle it,
yeah.
there Needless to say, it's been a long 7 years.
Yeah, well, let's step into that. So what was your first property or group of properties that you ended up buying? You said you ended up doing turnkey investing. Like, how'd that come about? And then let's walk through maybe first couple properties.
So that story gets a little bit funnier.
Yeah.
So I think I mentioned, there's an investment opportunity webinar that came into my email inbox, completely
Yeah.
random. And not kidding you, my very first intentional investment, at this point I had lived in my own house. I took a job, transferred to California, so I was renting out that house. So it was technically an investment property at the time, but my first intentional, like trying to buy an investment property, was from this webinar. And it was a pre-construction development in Nicaragua, the third world country.
Mm-hmm.
And my first thought when I saw it, I was like, first of all, the starting prices, it was like buy a beachfront bungalow for $99,000. I was like, now that I could probably do, because I'm here in LA and I had looked around Orange County and like, what do you buy? And I was like, man, everything's expensive, but like $99,000 for a beach bungalow in a third world country. I was like, first of all, that sounds rad.
Yeah.
Second, if I can do anything to ruffle people's feathers, I'm in. Like, everyone's like, I'm sorry, you're buying where?
Yeah.
and so I watched this webinar. It all sounded super cool. The development was really legit at the time. They had big name hotel partners, big name partners all over the place. Big investors were buying into this thing. And so I got the sales contract because I was like, and they had a seller financing offer too. And I was like, as a first, like, yes, I can do this.
Yeah.
And I got the contract, but I was certain also too that it was a total scam. I mean, beachfront property in Nicaragua, like nothing sketchy about that.
Yeah.
And so I got the contract and I redlined it. I was like, I'm going to prove to these people that like who's smarter now? And I met with one of the partners of it and it all seemed really legit. And I was like, wait, I wasn't planning to I thought I was planning to prove them as a scam, like not end up wanting to really buy this thing. So I ended up buying into the development. I ended up buying 2 properties. And I think if you're in a third world country or the US, the famous developer story can be the same. You put the money in, promises of being built, and suddenly the guy disappears to the Caribbean. And I think it's happened to most investors that I know. I mean, pretty much everyone who's bought pre-construction development to some degree, that's happened to. The extra downside in a third world country is like in the States, the FBI will get involved. You have a lot of recourse to try and chase these people. Not to say you'll get your money back, but people care. In a third world country, you don't really have those luxuries of people really trying to support you, and you're kind of on your own. And to this day, it's a lost investment. So that was my first investment, $40,000 in the hole. I was like, yay, this real estate thing is really working for me. Cool. Now what?
But you kept going.
I did. Fortunately, before I completely kicked the bucket for it, kicked the real estate bucket, the people who I met through this project, one thing I really, really appreciate, aside from I was going to Nicaragua all the time, and it's still to this day is one of my favorite countries on the planet. Suddenly I was meeting real estate investors. And what I really liked about real estate investors was that everybody to some degree is pretty, decently smart. You can't be a total dummy and get away with anything real estate investors. So decently smart people.
I'm pretty
with
dumb.
a little bit
just
of,
just
the
FYI.
what?
I'm pretty dumb, but just
I
just figured out.
Seriously doubt that. But there's also somewhat of a sense of adventure, because we didn't learn this stuff in school, and so there's risk, and it's high stakes sometimes, and then at the point you're talking about real estate investors in somewhere like Nicaragua, they're super adventurous. So it was kind of like I was finding my people for the first time. I was like, hey, like I like these people better. And engineers tortured me. Like here I am. I'm like, hey, what you doing? Want to go to lunch? I'm like talking. And they're like, that was like the story of my 5 years.
Yeah.
So I was having so much fun, but I was making so many connections and meeting these really cool people that a lot of the partners who were working on that project were also involved in turnkeys. At the time, they had been involved in Phoenix and Memphis. Phoenix used to be a fantastic turnkey market when there was still cash flow. And knowing I was from Atlanta, they kind of said, we were sitting down, I don't know, having a drink or something one day, and one of them said, hey, I just want to give you a heads up. I know that we work with Turnkey Properties. And at the time, I hadn't really thought much about them or looked into them. I didn't really care. I was more focused on third world countries. He said, I just want to give you a heads up. The next market we're going to be working in is Atlanta. And I was like, wow, well, I'm from there. Tell me more. And this was in 2011, which is right before the gigantic boom of Atlanta. And I was like, well, shoot. I would look into that stuff. And this was also back in the day where you could buy a perfectly good, decent size, big house in a B to B plus neighborhood. My very first turnkey property was $55,000. I mean, it was absurdly cheap, and the rents on it were $975 a month. If you run those numbers, the
It's
price
great.
to rent ratios were absurd. So I was like, well, for $55,000, I only need like 10 grand for mortgages. Like, this seemed like a no brainer. So I flew to Atlanta, started touring turnkey operations. And that's really what started. And like I said, I was just doing this on the side at the time. And when I started buying those properties, that's when people are like, hold the phone. What are you buying that you don't have to put work into? Because a lot of people just don't want to swing the hammers and get rid of dead rats in properties. So that's what really started the whole thing. And I've been involved with turnkeys ever since. About a year and a half ago, me and some partners actually went. So everything I've ever preached on Bigger Pockets or on podcasts and everything I've ever done is like passive income. Don't landlord your own property. Make sure there's positive cash flow. Don't buy at the top of the market. All this stuff. So a year and a half ago, me and some partners bought a property local to me here in Venice Beach at the top of the market, negative cash flow. I'm the landlord, and it was just like, like, okay, cool. And I love this property. It's a high-end property. It's not like I'm slumlording, but it truly proved to me why I've been preaching what I've been preaching. Like,
Yeah.
like when we first bought it, we didn't have to do a ton of work to it, but I would have to get up early and meet a contractor at 8 a.m. And I'm like, this is not my thing. So it was kind of cool in that it re-encouraged everything I had been shouting off about for the last however many years at that time of the turnkeys. And now I'm sure we'll talk about this, but we've kind of branched into the bird keys at this time. Turnkey, there's pros and cons to turnkeys, and the bird keys they combine the perks of the burr model and the turnkey model, and we can talk details about that. But so it's kind of a cool adventure, but really everything I do, whether it's with business or real estate or whatever, aside from this one property I landlord, is really about like keeping my priorities in check. Like I tell people all the time, I love sleeping in. It's one of my greatest joys in life to be able to wake up when my body wants to wake up. And, just that freedom alone is huge. So like, however I structure my life, whatever projects I'm doing, like I have to keep that freedom component for myself because that's my jam. And then, for other people doing whatever, it's like, really tailoring your life. It's lifestyle design. Like make your life what you want it to be. Not to say it won't take hard work to get there, but like when I have to work really hard, I can still do that. I can travel to a foreign country and do that because everything I do is internet based now. So that's one, part of my lifestyle design structure is that I'm allowed to do that while I'm still working kind of thing. So yeah, I honestly rambled on for so long. I don't remember what the original question was. I think it had something to do with turnkeys, but
No, that's perfect. You're right on track. Real quick, just explain, because we've kind of highlighted over all the stuff you did with turnkey, but
Mhm.
like if somebody's listening and they have no idea, like what is she talking about? I don't know what
Yeah.
turnkey is. What is turnkey and how do you get a turnkey?
Yep. So the term turnkey itself actually technically refers to the condition of a property. So if you were to buy the property next door to you, it'd be fully rehabbed or freshly rehabbed or something. Tenants already in place paying rent. And in most turnkey cases, property management set up to manage the property once you buy it. So you could buy technically any property. If it's in turnkey condition, you could call it a turnkey. So the idea with the term is like all you have to do is stick the key in the door and turn the key and you're making cash flow on day one. That's the kind of idea behind it. When I'm talking about turnkey properties, I'm usually talking specifically about ones that there are turnkey providers. So there are companies who are staked out in different markets with a lot of inventory. They go out, they negotiate the deals, they find the sellers, they rehab the property, they put the tenants in, and they have property management lined up, ready to manage your property for you. So you as the buyer, you just have to basically pick out the property. You're responsible for due diligence. That's another conversation. But like again, keeping your brains attached to the equation, it's up to you to verify everything. You don't want to just take someone's word for it of what you're buying, but ultimately you get to just kind of go shopping while they do all the hard work. And so as far as buying one, like if you buy from a turnkey provider, obviously the first step is getting hooked up with a turnkey provider. But then you kind of shop through the properties, pick out the one you want. And just like you would buy a primary home buyer's house, you do the sales contract, the earnest money, run the due diligence, get the property inspection, confirm everything, tenant leases, run the numbers, blah, 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 close on the property, and you're in. And the major pro and the major con about this model, the major pro, I was about to say, is there only one? I mean, there's a few pros, but the major pro being that you actually really aren't putting any money into it until you verify everything. Aside from your earnest money, but that's held in escrow. So you've at that point confirmed the condition of the property. You have confirmed, you know who the tenants are in. You've interview the property managers, like you have ensured you're down for all of this before you put your money in, which is great because it decreases the risk to your money, obviously. The major downside and why the people who don't like turnkeys, and this is a totally justified reason, is you're going to be paying market value for them, give or take. So, a lot of people get into real estate with the whole idea, and for good reason, being this value add proposition, where you go buy this distressed property for $60,000, you put $20,000 in, so you're $80,000 in, but now it's worth 100 or 120. It's that forcing appreciation that people are really in real estate for. And you're not going to have that option with the regular turnkeys because you're going to pay market value on an already improved property. And so you're not even really going to have much of a way to improve it, even if you wanted to.
Right.
And so that's the major downside, but you also can do traditional financing. It's usually investment property loans, like 20 to 25% down, which can be a holdup for people because how many 20% downs are you going to have? But that the ability to like snowball your investments into one another is pretty curbed on the standard turnkeys. So that's the downside. But again, everything's done for you, and I can go play on the beach and have someone else deal with all the drama on my property. So
yeah, no, definitely. Turnkey definitely makes sense for, just like syndications definitely makes sense for a lot of people. It's the same kind of person, really is somebody that wants a passive investment that's already kind of self-running, self-managing, and they don't have to do all that work like you just talked about. But they were, I definitely feel they were really good and popular, whether you thought they were at the time or not, because everybody thinks every year is the top of the market and it just keeps going since 2014. What do you think as far as the market goes today and finding like a reputable turnkey company that's has profitable properties and not pulling your leg or trying to screw you out of your money?
It's a funny conversation because you'll hear, like, if you research turnkey properties, you'll hear so much feedback on like, oh my God, they're a scam. Because like back in 2011, for example, when I was buying a fully rehab property for $55,000, one of the biggest things that was happening is, number one, everyone and their mother started their own turnkey company because it was so profitable. Well, you can imagine the quality of a lot of those companies. It was terrible. Whereas now, the companies who exist, I mean, there's still maybe some out there that there's a couple I definitely wouldn't work with, but for the most part, all the companies out today have kind of stood the test of time. So there's kind of a different level of assumption as far as like how good the providers are or what your options are. Whereas in 2011, you didn't know who you were working with. And what happened with a lot of companies, they would sell to a lot of international investors. These were the days when all the hedge funds were buying up in Memphis and Atlanta. Everyone was buying in the States because of what was available. And there were companies out there who knew these international investors were never going to come see the property. So they could sell them whatever they wanted to with no real, there wasn't a lot of checks and balances on these things. And so turnkeys got a bit of a sketchy name. And then without naming names, there was a company in the last few years that has really scared people off of turnkeys because basically, and I don't really know enough about the situation to say one thing for sure, but all I've heard is that basically local, like US people were buying properties and then they were ending up with something that was like, I think I heard a story of like one of the walls wasn't even on the house. One of the houses burned down like 3 days before the closing and they still closed on it. Basically these houses were not as advertised. And the thing is, and I don't want to knock any buyer, but because often turnkey investors are brand new and they don't know otherwise, but it's all about that due diligence. In my mind, I don't care. I mean, I do care, but like, even if the company's a total scam, you're not verifying anything about the company. You're verifying things about the property. And there's very little about a property that you can't verify aside from, things you can't help or whatever. But, to me, there's no reason why you would end up buying a property with only 3 walls if you did proper due diligence. So that's kind of that. I don't know if that's helpful.
That definitely that helps. But that's kind of my second part to that question is like where it is in today's market. I'm sure it was only working in a few markets around the country. Memphis, I know
Yeah.
there's still Turnkey and maybe a select few others, but I don't know if you can even give a number to this, but do you know kind of what the returns people can get still
hmm
today in some of these markets?
Yeah. Yeah, and like you said, where I was going with that whole kind of ramble is like it's, just for people to understand, it's about verifying the properties, not so much the providers, but there are absolutely still providers, great providers out there. One cool thing, even though whether we're at the peak of the market or we are high in the market, whatever it is, so the numbers aren't nearly as good as like 2011, but you can still get cash flow. So these properties are cash flow based more than appreciation based. So every month your income should be higher than your expenses, so you're pocketing money.
Mm-hmm.
So the opportunities are there. And right now, I'd say the cap rates are ranging anywhere ballpark between 6 and 10%. I'd say maybe like between 7 and 8 on average. It completely depends on what market you're in. Like multifamilies are going to have higher cap rates, obviously, but you're also taking on added risk factor. Yeah, it's kind of it's across the board. I know the bird keys that I work with have the highest cap rates by far. Those are more in the like 9 to 10% range, but that's kind of a whole different setup.
Well,
But the standard turnkeys, 6 to 9, you can assume.
okay. Well, that's where I was going to go next is like, this is kind of where your company kind of comes into play is like
hmm
helping kind of vet out some of these turnkey
Yeah,
providers and pairing up people with the proper turnkey provider that works
yeah,
best for them, and then making sure that both sides are taken care of. Is that
yeah,
correct?
yeah,
So
totally.
kind of explain to us like what do you guys do, and then we'll dive into the Berkey and like what it
hmm
is and how people can make it work for them.
Yeah. So when I started Hipster, and it's funny because I'm not even remotely close to a hipster, but it's worked. It's actually turned out phenomenal for our business to have such a ridiculous name. But the idea was I really wanted to be at the time. So this was like 2011, 2012. That was kind of starting this. And one thing that I found when I was trying to learn real estate investing is like I didn't know who to trust.
Mhm.
And there's so many stuffy faces and bigger pockets. It's like a dude in a suit saying you should buy this, and like it was just kind of weird. And so what I wanted to be for people was really just kind of this friendly face that's like, hey, here's what I did that works for me. Buy it or don't. I mean, I'm not gonna say I don't care, but like you do you. I'm not one of those. Like if you choose a different strategy other than turnkey, I'll be the first person to tell you not to buy a turnkey if I don't think a turnkey is for you. But
Yeah.
I wanted to just be kind of a friendly face in an otherwise kind of stuffy industry. And so the company's premise really kind of started out as really just I was a glorified matchmaker because I had found companies that I really trusted, and I was personally buying through these companies. So I was like, hey, I'll tell you who I bought through. Like, and so my policy from the get go, since we started Hipster, it started with I'm not going to refer you to any companies that I haven't personally bought through myself. But as the years have gone on, I obviously haven't been able to buy through every company I work with now. So now it's like I'm not going to refer you to any company that I either haven't bought through myself or that I trust so much that I would send my mother there. Like I won't refer for just anybody. And so really it was about this matchmaking of like, I have good resources. I'll give them to you, take them or leave them. That was kind of whatever. But over the years, I would almost say that, so that happens. That's kind of Hipster's role. But I really took on this role of emotional support dog. Because like I said, turnkeys really, they're an opportunity for newer investors to get in on it. Even somebody who wants to burr or flip or wholesale or whatever later on, turnkeys are a great starting point because they allow you to learn the fundamentals. So they bring in a lot of new investors, and buying your first property is terrifying. It's like, oh, I'm going to buy this house and it's going to have tenants and so I really kind of stay on as the emotional support dog, like through the buying process. Like I'll hook you up with whatever. I'll help guide you if you need questions on, which market do I buy in? What about this property? Whatever, help you through the buying process. Once you've bought a turnkey once, it's kind of brainless after that because it's the same process every time. But when you haven't done it before, you don't know what you don't know. So I help you with that. And then afterwards, I tell people, even if it's 5 years down the road, if you have a challenge with a property, reach out to me. Like, I want to stay on. I want your whole experience to be good. And, we've had people that have had challenges with sellers and whatever, and we really try and stay on as a support system. And I do it all, and I don't charge the buyers. I get paid on the seller side. So it's a free service really to anyone interested in buying a turnkey. So it's kind of like at the point it's free.
Yeah.
you know?
Well, and that's kind of reassuring too to hear, because like you'd mentioned earlier, a lot of the shady
Mhm.
fix and turnkey providers, they've kind of got weeded out, because the reason
Yeah.
they were able to make money is because there was thousands of
Oh,
properties out there that
yeah.
are just like so easy. There's like dime a dozen. You just like
Yeah.
all of them you could just flip and get rid of. But now the properties are
Mhm.
becoming harder and harder to find. So
Yeah.
it's only the good ones that are really there. And they're having a lot of repeat customers, which is the
Yeah.
same with you, right? Like I'm sure you have a lot of repeat customers that keep coming back to you, so you
Yeah.
keep that relationship going
Yeah, and
long
it's a
term.
long-term relationship. Like it doesn't benefit, like if you come to me and you're like, "Hey, I think I might be interested in turnkey," and I can see from the get-go that turnkey's 100% not for you. What favors am I doing, especially with bigger pockets?
Yeah.
Like my reputation's not worth me screwing you over. Like, it's this whole transactional relationship versus long-term relationship.
Hmm.
And people's experiences haven't been perfect. They're not perfect in real estate. We don't have a perfect track record. We have a heck of a lot of success, but things happen sometimes, and it's to my advantage to help you through that and to not purposely connect you with those things, because what's the first thing you're going to do when something bad happens? You're going to go to bigger pockets and splue my name all over the place, and I can lose my company. So and I could go on a whole tangent about that, but that's what it is. We're all in this together. Like
Hmm.
it's as important to my success as it is for your property to succeed. And so just kind of having that support system. And I tell people all the time, like, if you kind of think about it, like, if you go out on this on your own and you go direct to a turnkey provider and you're buying one property for them, you're not making or breaking their bank account. And so, like, if they wanted to kind of screw you, they could, because it's not really going to hurt anything. But like, if we bring hundreds of turnkey buyers to the seller and they try and screw you, you're part of a bigger network. Like, that's something, we kind of unofficially, I don't want to say offer this because we don't talk about it, but that's something you kind of get with the benefit of it, is you have all of us. And we've had instances that we had well, he wasn't bad for years, but he turned into a bad seller, and people were having a lot of challenges, and we were able to kind of go to bat for these people on their behalf and help them. So that, that's what we're here for. And it's so funny. Like, I don't know what it is about real estate investing, or maybe it's people in general or entrepreneurship. People think they're like, no, I'm this badass, I'm going to do it all by myself. And I'm like, fine, go
Yeah.
do that. But like, okay,
It
have fun.
always works better together.
Yeah, like, who are you going to vent to when something, like, at a minimum? But
Yeah.
yeah, so it's really about, if for everyone I work with, we're in it for the long-term relationships, because transactional based things
Hmm.
don't work. I mean, I actually just lost a business relationship over the weekend. It was a long time, because it turned into on that person's end, they were trying to pull this transactional crap on me, and it soured our relationship, and it's over now, because the interests that were being focused on were not, what's going to be better for the long term, and that's not what any of us are in this for.
No, that all makes total sense, and that's why the company's still successful and growing. And so
Hmm.
you mentioned Berkey. That's kind of like what
Yeah.
you're focused on
Like,
now,
ooh,
which is
I got
I,
excited. I like
look
the
at that.
rookies.
Yeah. So even though you hate the term, but the
Oh,
process is still awesome.
God,
But
that acronym.
we're working on that. I'm
Like,
going to work
it's
on
like
this too.
what's the like disc shooting or whatever, like shoot the clay disc up and
Oh
shoot,
yeah.
like go shooting. That's
What
what
was
I
that
want to do with
called?
that
Yeah.
acronym.
Yeah.
Write it
Um,
on a clay disc.
well, if anybody out there has a good acronym for Burr investing and turnkey together besides
Uh-huh.
Berkey, let us know, and I'll pass it on to Allie here, and
And I'll
you can have
clarify.
it.
My
Yeah.
biggest problem with the BRRRR acronym is how many R's. Because I'm like, okay, like I've been saying, I have to reference BRRRRs. I've done it for years, and it's like, okay, hang on. Buy,
I know.
rehab, rent, refinance, like, I should
Yeah.
not have to think that hard.
I
Like,
know.
it's,
Well, and
and
some
then
of
when
them have
spelling
more
it out,
R's.
I end up putting like 7R. I'm like, R.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
They should have another
oh,
letter, something that's like a long
shake it up a
R.
little bit. Yeah. I don't, we're a bunch of smart people. I don't see why we can't figure this out. So that'll
Yeah.
be the mission for this.
Okay.
Um, So it's super exciting. So I already told you the major downsides to the turnkeys.
Hmm.
And, back in 2011, the downsides didn't really matter as much. Like, all the turnkeys I bought in Atlanta in 2011, 2012 have since doubled and tripled in value. And that was unique to that situation, though, because the market is what drove those values. I couldn't personally improve the properties myself. So
Hmm.
when you're dependent on something like the market to drive your equity, like buying today, you're not going to have that big of a boom in any of the markets. So you're not going to double and triple in value. So what people really like about the BRRRR model, buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat every time, is this value add proposition. So you put 60 grand into buying this property, you put 20 into the rehab, and now it's worth 80, 100, 120, whatever. It's that capture of equity that people are really into real estate investing for. So that's the major perk to the BRRRR model, is the value add component. So if you combine these two models, what happens? So, I mentioned when you buy a standard turnkey, you're not putting any money in the pot. So the turnkey provider is actually the one funding the distressed property purchase, funding the rehab, funding everything. So all of the risk is on them, because if they completely screw something up, you just don't close on it. Like you don't have risk in this necessarily. So you pay money after everything's been verified. So if you back that process up, the BRRRR keys, what's happening is you're getting the best of both worlds. You are, instead of waiting to pay, you're actually the person funding the purchase of the distressed property and the rehab. And while you're the one funding it, just like you would be doing for the BRRRR model, is the same way. You buy the distressed property and fund the rehab. So you do it just like the BRRRR model, but instead of you doing all the work, the turnkey providers are doing all the work. So you're funding it, but you're still ending up with a turnkey property. And what happens, the benefit to doing this is, once they finish all the rehab and whatever, that forced appreciation is yours. So now you've just paid under market value. And at the 6-month mark or whatever month mark, when you go to cash out, refinance this property, let's say that you're 100 in and it now appraises for 120. That's yours. And so when you pull that loan back out, you only have to keep 20% in, if I'm saying that correctly and clearly. So like if you buy a standard turnkey property for $100,000, you've got to put $20,000 into it. You need a lot of sets of $20,000. If you want to buy 5 turnkey properties, you have to have 5 sets of $20,000, because there's no rinse and repeat kind of option here. But if you now are forcing that value up, you're pulling the money out. You don't have a full 20 grand in, because now the value is 120. Is that making sense?
Yes, totally making sense.
I start getting myself tangled up. I'm like, but you get my point.
Yeah.
So then it allows you to start doing that rinse and repeat method, because you're not keeping a full 20. And, in some cases, you might be able to get all your money back out. So, like if the value is 20% higher than that 100 grand, then you get your whole 100 grand back out, or whatever the math works out to be. So
yeah, no, it totally makes sense. So this is kind of like the perfect, also another option for wholesalers out there that want to maybe get into this type of business as a turnkey or something, that they can, like, they already have the marketing and the business rolling along to where they're finding all these distressed properties. And so sometimes we end up flipping them, like what I'm doing with the partner up in Idaho. And sometimes we end up selling them, whatever, wholesaling. But that's another option, that you could, sell the property and then they fund the renovations. And then you guys, since you already have the contractors in place and everything, fix them up. And then the people have a fully operating property. So that totally makes a ton of sense. But what markets are you really like working in? Do you have a select couple markets, or is it like tons of markets?
So for the standard turnkeys, we have quite a few markets. The markets are always changing. What's a good market today may not be great tomorrow. Like we don't do anything in Atlanta anymore, when that used to be the number one. We have that ability because, first of all, there's more standard turnkey providers. But again, the biggest downfall to the BRRRR method is, like we said, it's now your money in the pot. So if you put your money in the pot for this, and you're really just hoping to God the turnkey provider is going to do as they say. And we had a situation where we were working with a BRRRR provider. This is a whole different conversation, but he ended up moving to the Caribbean, and we're like, 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 right, back to this pre-construction development risk. It's kind of the same thing. So with that said, it is imperative that you work with a good company, because while you own the property, what you don't want to happen is them and you pay the rehab money in increments, like, milestone is hit, then you give more. So you're not putting the whole 100% of the rehab costs in up front, but let's say 50% of it, if they move off to the Caribbean with your 50% of that rehab money, and now you own this property, but it's distressed and you don't know how to flip and you don't know how to, you can really end up in a pickle. So we are extremely limited in who we're working with the Berkeys for that exact reason. Is we can't work with just anyone on this, because it is it's just not comforting. I don't know if that's the right word, but like, your money's at risk. End of story. So again, the standard turnkeys, you get to verify everything before you put your money into the pot. With the Berkeys, it matters it absolutely matters who you're working with. So with that said, we've been doing it in Philadelphia and Baltimore, but Philly is kind of dried up right now as far as returns and prices and inventory and all sorts of stuff. So it's mostly Baltimore right now, which I realize not everybody's super comfortable with, but I flew out last, I think, September, and I did a whole investors tour and tour the property. And actually, this company I like so much, I'm going to start doing more work with them. Like, I really, really value the guy who runs this company, and I don't say that about many real estate people. So I'm actually stoked to get more and more involved with these properties because they're so freaking unique. Number one, the model's very unique. It combines the best of all the worlds, and this seller in particular is very unique in that he's the kind of guy that he will literally lose sleep if someone's having a challenge with their property. Like, I have to try and convince him to back off a little bit and like allow himself to sleep, have some time off, but he genuinely cares and he has so much heart, and you just don't find that in real estate very often. So I am stoked to work with these guys. But we've got we have a brand new investor just closed on 2 Burr properties with them. We've got people buying all, like, it's exciting. And I did leave out one obvious downfall to these is for the standard turnkeys, like, you have to have 20 or 25 grand on hand to be able to do that with. The Berkeys are cash up front. So if it's going to be $100,000 property all in, you have to buy all that with cash. You'll get that back out on the refi in 6 months or whatever, but it is very limiting because not everyone has slabs of 100 grand cash in their pocket either.
Well, I'm sure you could find, if you really dug in there, not you, but the people
Yeah.
could find local banks that'll do like construction loans and stuff like
Yeah.
that to work on the properties. But if they're also looking for a turnkey property or something like that, then they're probably not out there hitting the streets for those type of banks anyways, you know what I mean? Because they're kind of more hands off.
And the people that, a lot of people come in and are like, can I do a hard money loan? It's like, okay, cool. Like, logistically that can work, but keep in mind too, like, what's worst case scenario here? If you pull out 100 grand of cash from whatever bank and the seller moves off to the Caribbean, like, how bad of shape are you going to be in? So we try and really, like, we all get a little hesitant when people want to bring financing into the equation, just because we don't want anyone to get messed up or tangled up either, because, like, what's the time frame on the loan versus what if something happens with the property, not to say it can't work, but it's, I'd say the majority of buyers have $100,000 cash that they're working with, but I'd just say that to caution anyone, if you're looking for hard money or whatever, like, be really diligent about how you're going to structure that, just to make sure that you're not completely shooting yourself in the foot for time frames or interest or whatever it is.
For sure. Yeah. So real quick before we move on to the next little section. So can you give an example, like this person that you just had buy 2 properties? Like, what are some of the numbers? Like, what do the properties look like? If you remember, I don't know if you.
I do not remember, but I can't remember. I don't think I have the listings for those that just closed. But let's see, where can I do? And these are old properties, but to give you an idea of the numbers, let's see. So I've got one here. Was this the one that when I went and toured, I was not in a position to buy myself right at that second, but there was this one property that I was like, I want it. And I think it was this one. I'm pretty sure. So the price was listed at 109, and that includes buying the distressed property and the rehab. That's all inclusive. The estimated ARV afterwards was going to be about 120, so about 11 grand. And this company too, with their ARV estimates, stay very much on the conservative side. Like I heard kind of all their logic that goes into it. That's like the most conservative number they can come up with. And the rent on that property was going to be $1,300 a month. So that translates into about a 9.9% cap rate.
Yeah, that's great.
That one was requiring a full renovation. That was a big 4-bedroom house. Most of these houses are row houses because it is Baltimore. That was in a developing neighborhood of Union Square, for anyone who's familiar with Baltimore. They had a triplex at one point available for $185. The rent being $1,850 a month. Except I don't have an ARV on that one, so that's not very helpful. Yeah, I mean, I'd say like this one was 100,000, ARV of 120, rents of 1,100, so it was a 9.2% cap rate. This one was the price was 90. This one is insane. I remember this one. Price was 90. The ARV was estimated at 120, rents of 1,150 a month, and that was going to be a 10.6% cap rate. So, and that's the other thing too. When we were talking about cap rate ranges, these Berkeys by far are higher than all the standard turnkeys too. So that's another factor. This one, like right here, is only 7%, but that was actually in a B+ area right next door to John Hopkins. So, they have the different kind of variations around east side, west side, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, for sure. And you can kind of choose what kind of, quality property you want. If you want a C class, B class, whatever.
Yeah. And they're really diligent too, because they sell some properties as is. So like if you want, if you want to do traditional financing, you're not going to get it freshly rehabbed, but they have access to really good properties. But they're also doing a lot of subject twos now because the Baltimore appraisals are all over the place. He was telling me a couple days ago, one property, they got an appraisal that came in at 80 and one that came in at 155. And he's like,
the same property?
Yeah, same property. He was like, it's a thing in Baltimore. And this is probably the case in a lot of markets, but Baltimore especially, the appraisals are all over the board. So they're now working with subject to clauses to help prevent basically that 80,000 appraisal, because if you're in this for that equity and suddenly it appraises at 80,000, you're in it for 100 or 120, that's not helpful. So they're really putting kind of mitigations in to help you get to the ARV that they're helping estimate. And they're so good about like the newer investor who just bought the 2 properties. She's a newer investor and she felt better with slightly lower cap rates and better neighborhoods, and so they can kind of guide people through all that and all that kind of stuff. So it's really fun. Like I love the guy who runs it. He's been in development for 25 years. I have a blast every time I hang out with them, and it's a really fun new kind of project.
Yeah, for sure. No, I had that happen on a house I was selling one time too. It went into escrow a couple times and it fell out. And so each buyer had their own appraisals done.
Yeah.
And, like I had one appraisal that was like 395 and then one that was like 375. And I was like, so what we ended up doing, just if anybody ever has that problem, we got all the data together, my agent and everything, and then we emailed them and laid our case out why it should be higher, and I think they ended up raising the appraisal and reappraising it higher. But I was like, what? I don't understand. There should be some set thing here for appraisals. But either way, that's another topic. So, well, yeah, this is all awesome information, and it's kind of another route for people to take as a turnkey way. Obviously, there's always going to be deals. You just got to find out the new path to get to your deal. And if you're looking for passive investments, this is a great way. So where is Allie and Hipster Investments, and where are you guys going in the future? Like, what's the direction you're headed? You're going to continue, or you mentioned earlier that you're kind of wherever the wind takes you, you're kind of going that direction.
I've, I used to be a lot more like, I don't want to say focus driven, but like kind of goal driven sort of thing. And I'm in such like a surrender, like, cool, what's next, mode. Cause sometimes I don't always know what the next cool thing is going to be, but, where we are now, I can only assume Hipster's going to keep going. We have a lot of fun with it. My team that works with me, they've all been with me for years. One of my favorite things about Hipster is just the people engagement. Like, yes, we're running a business. Yes, we're selling properties, but like, I just get to meet I get to do podcasts like this, meet cool people. So I can't imagine that Hipster's going anywhere. We're looking for different ways to expand. We're a little bit limited in that because we want to keep things that are in support of lifestyle design, passive income. Like, we're not hammer swingers. We're not any of that. But like, what are those really unique opportunities or passive opportunities that people can take advantage of? I ended up meeting a guy last fall who I really liked. He is an owner of a real estate fund. And so, to invest in a fund, you have to be an accredited investor. If you're international, that's fine. You don't have to be accredited. But if you're an accredited investor, you have the option to buy into these fund type of deals. And so we're actually offering that now. We're working with him. So if, we have any run across people who want something hardcore passive and not owning the actual property, it's a great gig for the accredited investors. So that's just a little bit of a side thing. I'm working on a book. I'm hoping to get that out. The bird keys really are the biggest new exciting thing. But really just kind of keeping an eye out for, I don't know. I want to say keeping an eye out for it's not even the next big thing, but like where are the gaps that we can fill as far as like kind of where I'm at now. And I don't know that if Hipster will be the vehicle for this or not, is like, I'm so big on the mindset now that I've kind of gone the technical side of it and buying properties and I can do with that, is like, my book is very mindset based. And that's the stuff I love talking about. Like I like the psychology and the mindset and all that kind of stuff. And, so I've written blogs on all those things. I don't know, necessarily what a business route with all that is, but we have now so I've only been on Facebook for a year. I was like 14 or 15 years late to that game, which turns out I hate Facebook as much as I thought I would.
Yeah.
But the one thing I do love about it is I started a Turnkey's Facebook group. And I honestly, aside from having no Facebook experience, I didn't think it was going to pick up. We're to almost 700 members now. And it has turned out to be the coolest just group. People can ask whatever the turnkey questions are. I'll send out like recent, cool blogs or, just kind of fun stuff. And I've gotten to meet so many people that way. I was doing Facebook Lives pretty regularly for a while. And so I get to sit here and like get the live questions and answer them. And I love stuff like that. So I don't know really what the future entails, but I hope it involves people and talking to people and just, kind of trying to, I'm going to say, do good in the industry. Like, I just want people to be able to take a breather and, because again, everyone's trying to get sold on things and it's a little bit of a rough industry. So if I can help, or me and Hipster can help smooth that out for people at all, that's kind of what we're here for.
Perfect. No, yeah, that's exactly kind of what I thought you were going to say, because it's exciting to see where you're going to go, and I'm interested to keep in touch on that. So what are like some of your, favorite resources, especially you deal with a lot of people that don't know about real estate. What are some resources that you like, the best resource you like to learn about real estate or a new type of investment?
So I don't know if I'll be super helpful in this because I am such an old school brain. Like, I listen to like 60s music. If it's any movie outside of like Top Gun, I probably haven't seen it. So with that said, like, I've always been a real book, like hardcover book person.
Yeah.
As far as online resources, I've never really...
Well, it doesn't have to be online. I mean, if
so
it's books
I know
too.
I'm like, everybody's online these days. I will tell you, I wish podcasts had been out when I was trying to learn all this stuff, because I can't imagine how much easier it is to actually hear like humans communicate. Like, even when I was looking at online resources or whatever, it's like, I don't know who I'm talking to. Like, I feel like the podcast, especially when you're doing video, it kind of lets you get to know the people on YouTube and all that kind of stuff. You can kind of feel out who you really want to be listening to. So
yeah.
With that said, the only really recommendations I can give are mostly hard copy books. Obviously, I'm sure everyone listening to this has read Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Yeah.
That's kind of an obvious. If you haven't, you have missed the boat. Even so, I have on my bookshelf, I have a long line of Rich Dad books.
Mm-hmm.
And I can honestly say that even from an entrepreneurship perspective, everything that went into building Hipster and every challenge I hit with Hipster, I had already been prepped from the Rich Dad books, and I was able to kind of overcome it based on what I learned from those books. Like, so, everyone talks about Rich Dad Poor Dad, but I'm a huge Robert Kiyosaki fan, and not everybody is. But I think the value of those teachings in all of the books, the Rich Dad Advisor books, whatever, I've yet to have seen any of them that panned out to be wrong. People say, "Oh, the Rich Dad didn't really exist." I don't care. Like, the information I think is legit. So, Rich Dad books all day long. One book that I always recommend it's a business book, but The E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber. What I love about it, even if you're only in real estate and not entrepreneurship specifically, it still explains some parts of entrepreneurship that I think is imperative for real estate investors also. He doesn't say it in reference to real estate investors, but it's the same principles as far as like what skill sets need to be involved in any successful business, which is real estate investing also, and how to, if you're not as strong in one of those, how to outsource that, because you have to have those components. So bringing team players in and all that kind of stuff. And it's a super small, easy book to read. Like you can read it in a couple sittings. I love how he explains things. And then the last one that's not business or real estate, I love The Success Principles by Jack Canfield. It's a little bit more, not affirmation based, but like, I think it's like 100 or 101 success principles. And I think that pertains to, I think all those books pertain to life, business, real estate, investing, everything. And then, what I tell people, regardless of what your preferred, I'm looking over here because my screen's over here.
Yeah.
Whoever you follow, like whether it's podcast or blog writers, or obviously I can refer my own blogs, but my favorite quote in life, and it really, really helped me get into real estate investing, was don't take advice from people you wouldn't trade shoes with. And that is something, because in the world of real estate investing, you're going to have like 1,000 people telling you what you should and shouldn't be doing, and including your family members and your friends and all the gurus and the podcast hosts and the people on the podcast and all these things. And what I really look for when people give me, especially when it's unsolicited advice, but when I get advice from people, is would I trade shoes with that person? So if the guy trying to give me financial advice is working a 9-to-5 behind a desk wearing a suit, not to say that what he's telling me is wrong, but I need to be careful about how much I follow that, because that's not what I'm trying to accomplish. So what really turned the tables for me was actually through that Nicaragua deal. I met this one guy in particular, and we were going to have a meeting about this contract that I redlined. And I showed up. It was on a rooftop pool deck in LA. He was wearing shorts, flip-flops, short sleeve shirt, no briefcase, no notepad, and he had just gotten back from traveling somewhere across the world. And I was like, how is this happening? Like, I wanted to trade shoes with that guy. So I was like, I need every bit of advice you're going to give me. And so I think that's so important, as you're, one of the things I kind of write in my book is like, what's step one? Research everything. Like, you've got to just start learning what's out there. And as you do that, you'll start kind of you'll kind of start figuring out like what resonates with you and what doesn't. Like, would you want to live that person's life, or do you want to live that person, find the people that you would trade shoes with and take their advice. I would trade shoes with Robert Kiyosaki all day long. I would trade shoes with Tim Ferriss all day long. So I'm going to read what they put out. And so I think that I think is the best thing I can give, even more than specific, resources, just, because it'll help you figure out who it is you really want to be listening to.
No, totally agree. I love that. So that's awesome. Well, Allie, we've learned a lot here, and we could probably keep going forever.
Oh, forever.
We we both got things that we probably should work on. But where can people find out more about Allie and Hipster Investments, and then how to get in touch and all that good stuff?
So I actually set up a website link just for everyone listening to this podcast in particular. If you go to, what did I create it to be, hipsterinvestments.com/365. What that's going to take you to is a few years ago, I wrote a Turnkey Rental Properties 101 ebook. It sells right now on Amazon for $14.99, and I set it up on that page so you can get it for free. So awesome. Just put in your info, you get the free ebook, and then through that, like it'll give you links and ways to find me. Otherwise, like I think my email address is on there. You're always welcome to email me directly. The Turnkey's Facebook group is on there. We'd love to have you in there. Like, we're having a lot of fun on that one. Yeah. But yeah, just go to hipsterinvestments.com/365, and that'll connect you. Once you find me in one place, you can find me all over the place.
That's awesome. I've been thinking about having people like provide something for the listeners, and so I'm so glad you did that, because you're the first person that's actually like been prepared, like ready to go. You know what I mean? So that's...
in all fairness, I had quite a learning curve before I figured out to do that.
Well, that's perfect.
Like,
see, I'm still
you gotta
learning
learn somehow.
See, I knew you were better at this than I am.
We all have our strengths.
Yeah. Well, perfect. Well, Allie, I really appreciate being here. You had tons of good information, great story. You guys go to her website link that she mentioned and reach out to her and find out more information on anything we talked about. And Allie, again, appreciate you, and you have a great afternoon.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
All right. See ya.